It was 2:17 a.m. when my phone lit up. Not buzzed, not chimed. Lit up. That soft white glow cut through the dark like it had something urgent to say. My room was quiet in the way only early morning can be. The air felt still, heavy. I was half asleep, floating somewhere between a dream and the real world, when that light pulled me back. At first, I ignored it. We all do. We convince ourselves it's nothing. A wrong number. A late notification. Something that can wait until morning. I remember squinting at the ceiling, hoping it would stop. Hoping whoever it was would realize the time and hang up. But it didn't stop. The light stayed there, steady and demanding. It filled the room just enough to make everything else look unfamiliar. The dresser, the chair in the corner. Even my own hands felt distant. For a few seconds, I just stared at it. There's something about a phone lighting up in the middle of the night that feels different. During the day, calls are noise. Interruptions. Reminders. At 2:17 a.m. A call feels like a message from another world. It feels like news that can't wait. News that has already decided your morning will not be normal. My heart started beating faster before I even touched the phone. I hadn't read the name. I hadn't heard a voice. But my body knew. I reached over slowly, like moving too fast would make whatever was happening more real. The screen was brighter up close. The name flashing across it didn't make sense at first. I blinked once. Twice. My brain struggled to catch up. Why would they be calling me at this hour? That question hung in the air for a split second, but the answer was already forming somewhere deeper. Somewhere honest. Because something is wrong. The room felt smaller. The quiet that had once been peaceful now felt loud. My throat went dry. I could hear my own breathing. I could hear the faint hum of the ceiling fan. I could hear the ring, steady and patient, like it knew I couldn't ignore it forever. Time stretched in those few seconds. It's strange how a moment can feel long enough to fit an entire lifetime of thoughts. I thought about the last conversation we had. I thought about things I meant to say but hadn't. I thought about how ordinary the day had been just hours before. The phone kept glowing. I realized something in that moment. There is a version of you that exists before you answer a call like that. That version of you is still protected, still unaware, still standing in yesterday. And then there's the version of you after. But I wasn't there yet. I was still in the space between. The fragile pause where everything is possible. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's small. Maybe it's a mistake. Hope is loud in moments like that. It tries to convince you that fear is dramatic, that you're overthinking, that you should relax. But fear doesn't show up without reason. My thumb hovered over the screen. Accept. Decline. Two simple options. Two small buttons that felt heavier than they should have. It amazed me how something so ordinary, something I had done thousands of times before, suddenly felt like the hardest decision of my life. Outside, the world was asleep. No cars passing. No voices. No movement. It felt like I was the only person awake, standing on the edge of something invisible. The light reflected in my eyes. I could see it on my hand. A cold, artificial glow. So small. So harmless looking. And yet it carried the weight of whatever news was on the other end. One call. That's all it was. One sound. One name. One moment. But even before I answered, I knew this wasn't just a call. It was a line being drawn. A dividing point I hadn't asked for. My heart pounded harder as the ringing continued, steady and unrelenting, filling the dark room with a quiet urgency that refused to fade. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I still didn't answer. The ringing had stopped for a second. Missed call. The silence that followed felt heavier than the sound. My phone rested in my hand, screen dimming slowly, as if it were giving me one last chance to pretend none of this was happening. I stared at the black screen after it went dark. For a moment, the room slipped back into shadow, back into normal. Then it lit up again. The second call felt louder, even though the sound hadn't changed. My chest tightened. Whoever was on the other end wasn't going to give up. And that's when the silence before I answered truly began. It wasn't just the quiet in the room. It was the quiet inside my head. A strange pause where every thought froze. The kind of silence that happens right before a storm hits. The kind that makes your skin feel too tight. I sat up slowly. The bedsheet slid off my lap, cool against my skin. My feet touched the floor, grounding me in the present, but nothing felt steady. The glow from the phone lit up my face again, patient and demanding. I didn't press accept. Instead, I watched the name flash across the screen like it might change if I stared at it long enough. Like maybe I had misread it. Maybe I was still dreaming, but it didn't change. There's something powerful about that gap between knowing and confirming. In that gap, you still have control. You can still choose not to hear it. As long as you don't answer, the worst hasn't officially arrived. I could feel my pulse in my ears. Each ring matched the beat of my heart. My mind started racing now, filling the silence with possibilities. What happened? Is everyone okay? Why me? Questions stacked on top of each other, but none of them had answers. Not yet. The silence stretched thin, fragile, like glass about to crack. I stood up and walked toward the window. I don't even know why. Maybe I needed movement. Maybe I needed proof that the world outside was still normal. The street was empty. A single street light flickered across the pavement. Nothing looked different, but everything felt different. The phone kept ringing. I thought about letting it go to voicemail, letting someone else handle it, letting a few more minutes pass before reality caught up to me. Those few seconds of delay felt like the only power I had left. Because once you answer, you can't go back. Once you hear the words, they exist. The silence before I answered wasn't peaceful. It was loud with anticipation. Loud with fear I didn't want to name. It pressed against my chest until breathing felt shallow. I looked at the clock on the wall. 2:18 a.m. Only 1 minute had passed since the first call. It felt like 20. Time bends in moments like that. Every second stretches out, thick and slow, giving you too much space to think. Too much space to imagine. I replayed the last time I spoke to them. What did we say? Did I rush the conversation? Did I promise to call back and forget? Did I assume there would always be another day? The ringing continued. My hand tightened around the phone. My fingers felt cold. I realized I was holding my breath. I let it out slowly, but it didn't calm anything. There's a strange kind of awareness that happens in that silence. You notice details you'd normally ignore. The hum of the refrigerator down the hall. The ticking of the clock. The faint rustle of leaves outside. Everything felt sharp and clear, like the world had turned up its volume while I stood frozen. And beneath all of it was one simple truth. This call is not random. People don't call twice at 2:17 in the morning to say hello. They don't call with good news. They don't call because they're bored. They call because something has happened. My thumb moved closer to the screen again. The green button glowed brighter than it should have. Such a small, ordinary thing. I had tapped that same button hundreds of times without thinking. But now, it felt like stepping off a ledge. The silence inside me broke just enough for one clear thought to rise above the rest. If I don't answer, it still exists. The truth doesn't disappear just because I refuse to hear it. The phone rang again, steady and unwavering, filling the dark room with a sound that demanded courage I wasn't sure I had. I pressed accept. The ringing stopped instantly. The silence that followed was sharper than before. For half a second, there was nothing but static and breathing on the other end. Hello. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was smaller, thinner, like it already knew it shouldn't be too loud. There's a moment after you answer a call like that when everything slows down. You hear details you would normally miss. The faint background noise. A car engine. A door closing somewhere far away. The way the other person inhales before they speak. That inhale told me everything. They weren't calling to chat. They weren't calling by accident. They were bracing themselves. When the first word finally came through, it felt heavy. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just heavy. I don't remember every sentence exactly. I remember fragments. Phrases. The way certain words seem to echo longer than they should have. There's been, we tried, you need to, each piece landed slowly, like it had to push through thick air before reaching me. At first, my brain refused to process it. I heard the words, but they didn't connect. It felt like listening to a language I almost understood, but not quite. I found myself asking, what? Not because I didn't hear them, but because I needed the words to rearrange into something less permanent. They didn't. The explanation continued, steady and careful. I could hear strain in their voice. The kind of strain that comes from repeating something they never imagined they would have to say. My hand gripped the phone tighter. My knees felt weak, so I sat down on the edge of the bed without taking my eyes off the wall in front of me. I needed something solid to focus on. The paint. The faint crack near the corner. Anything that didn't feel like it was shifting. The words I wasn't ready to hear settled in fully then. There had been an accident. It was serious. I needed to come now. That was it. Simple sentences. No dramatic music. No warning. Just facts delivered into the quiet of my room at 2:17 in the morning. I remember nodding even though they couldn't see me. Saying, Okay, even though nothing was okay. Asking questions that didn't really matter because the main truth had already landed. Is he awake? Where are you? What happened? The answers came, but they felt distant, like they were happening to someone else's life. My chest felt tight, like something was pressing down on it from the inside. I realized I hadn't blinked in a while. My eyes burned, but no tears came yet. It was too early for tears. Shock moves in first. It blocks everything else. I kept thinking there must be a mistake. Maybe they mixed up the names. Maybe it sounds worse than it is. Maybe by the time I get there, everything will already be fine. Hope tried again, softer this time. But the tone of their voice didn't leave room for hope to grow too large. It wasn't panicked. It wasn't hysterical. It was controlled. Controlled in the way people are when they are trying not to fall apart. I listened as they repeated the location, the hospital name, the room number, details I knew I would have to remember in a few minutes when my body started moving. The conversation wasn't long. It couldn't be. There wasn't much else to say. I'm sorry. Drive safe. Hurry. 3 phrases that felt like weights dropping one after another. When the call ended, the screen went dark again. The room returned to silence, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was heavier. Final. The words echoed in my head. Accident. Serious. Come now. I said them quietly to myself, as if repeating them would make them make sense. My heart was racing, but my body felt numb. I stood up slowly, like I was learning how to move again. My legs didn't feel steady. My hands trembled as I placed the phone down for a second, just to breathe. This is real. That thought landed harder than the words themselves. A few minutes ago, my biggest concern had been an early meeting. A deadline. Something small and ordinary. Now, none of it mattered. The world had narrowed down to one place. One person. One urgent need to move. I wasn't ready to hear those words. No one ever is. There's no preparation for a sentence that rearranges your priorities in an instant. No training for the moment when normal disappears and something fragile takes its place. I stood there in the dim light, replaying the conversation in my head, trying to catch any detail I might have missed, any hint that it wasn't as bad as it sounded. But the words remained steady and unchanging, sitting in the center of the room like something I couldn't step around. Before that call, the night had been ordinary. I had brushed my teeth, set my alarm, checked my messages one last time. I remember thinking about what I'd wear the next day. I remember feeling mildly annoyed about something small, something that doesn't even deserve space in my memory now. Life felt stable, predictable. Tomorrow existed in a straight line. After the call, that line snapped. It's strange how fast normal disappears. 1 minute you're planning breakfast. The next, you're pulling on yesterday's clothes with shaking hands because nothing else matters. The shift isn't gradual. It's instant. A clean break between the person you were 5 minutes ago and the person you are now. I moved through my room like a stranger. The same walls, the same furniture, the same dim light. But everything looked different, as if the room knew something I didn't before. I grabbed my keys from the dresser and almost dropped them. My fingers didn't feel steady. My body was awake, but my mind lagged behind. Normal had rules. Wake up, get ready, follow the routine. Now there were no rules, just urgency. I didn't turn on all the lights. I didn't check the time again. I didn't think about work or responsibilities. Those things belonged to the version of me that existed before the phone lit up. That version of me worried about traffic and emails and minor inconveniences. This version only cared about one thing: getting there. I walked down the hallway and noticed how loud my footsteps sounded. The house was still asleep. The world hadn't caught up yet. Somewhere out there, people were dreaming peacefully, unaware that my entire reality had shifted in the span of a 2-minute call. I stepped outside and the air hit my face, cold and sharp. It felt unfair that the night looked the same. The sky hadn't changed. The streetlights glowed softly. Nothing in the world reflected the weight sitting in my chest. I got into the car and sat there for a second, hands on the steering wheel, just breathing. The interior light flicked off when I closed the door, leaving me in a dim orange glow from the dashboard. I stared straight ahead, trying to steady my thoughts. Before the call, I would have driven carefully but casually. Maybe turned on music. Maybe checked directions without stress. Now, every second felt expensive. The engine started. The sound felt louder than usual. I pulled out of the driveway, and the street felt longer than it ever had before. Red lights felt like obstacles. Empty roads felt endless. That's when it hit me fully. Nothing will feel normal again, even if things turn out okay, even if the outcome isn't the worst case. This moment has already changed something. There is a before and an after now, a clear dividing line drawn at 2:17 a.m. I thought about how fragile routine really is. We build our days around small assumptions. That people will wake up tomorrow. That plans will stay in place. That life will follow the script we've quietly written in our heads. But it doesn't take much to tear that script in half. One call. That's all it took to erase every small complaint I had just hours earlier. The things that felt urgent suddenly seemed distant. Petty. Almost embarrassing. I replayed my last normal evening in my head. The way I casually said goodnight. The way I assumed there would be another conversation tomorrow. I didn't pause. I didn't linger. Why would I? Normal life doesn't teach you to prepare for disruption. As I drove, I felt like I was crossing an invisible border. Each mile carried me further from the person I had been when I went to sleep. That person believed in routine, in structure, in predictable mornings. This person understood how quickly everything can tilt. My phone sat on the passenger seat beside me, screen dark now. Just hours ago, it had been a tool, a convenience, something I barely noticed. Now it felt like a trigger, a reminder that something as small as a light in the dark can redraw your entire world. The shift from normal to never the same doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't give you time to prepare. It slides in quietly, carried by a familiar voice, delivered through a device you've held 1,000 times before. And once it arrives, there is no returning to the version of you who believed tomorrow would look exactly like today. That call took more than sleep from me. It took certainty. Before that night, I believed in quiet assumptions. I believed that if nothing looked wrong, then nothing was wrong. I believed that the people I loved were safe unless proven otherwise. I moved through my days with that invisible layer of protection most of us don't even realize we're wearing. The call stripped that away. In the hours and days that followed, I started noticing how fragile everything really is. The drive to the hospital felt longer than any trip I'd ever taken. Every red light felt cruel. Every slow car in front of me felt personal. I kept thinking that if I could just get there faster, I could undo what had already happened. But time doesn't move backward. When I finally walked through those hospital doors, the smell hit me first. That sterile, sharp scent that doesn't belong to ordinary life. The bright lights. The quiet urgency in the hallways. Nurses moving with practiced speed. None of it felt like my world. And yet, suddenly it was. That call took my sense of control. I realized how little of it I actually had. You can plan. You can prepare. You can organize your life down to the smallest detail. But you cannot control the unexpected moment that changes everything. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, stayed careful enough, thought ahead enough, I could protect the people around me. I could prevent disaster by being responsible, by being present, by doing all the right things. But that night showed me the truth. Some things happen without asking for permission. The call also took my innocence about time. I used to treat it casually. I'd say, "We'll talk tomorrow. I'll visit next week. There's plenty of time." Time felt generous, endless. After that call, time felt limited, precious in a way I had never fully understood. Every minute in that waiting room felt stretched thin. Every update from a doctor felt like it carried the weight of an entire future. I sat there replaying memories in my head. Small ones, ordinary ones. A laugh at dinner, a short phone conversation, a quick goodbye at the door. Moments I hadn't paid much attention to at the time. Suddenly, they felt important, fragile. I wondered how many other moments I had rushed through without realizing their value. The call took my comfort in routine. For weeks after, I would wake up in the middle of the night and check my phone just to make sure it wasn't glowing again. Any late notification made my heart jump. The sound of a ringtone felt sharper than before. Something inside me had changed. Even when life started moving forward again, even when schedules returned and responsibilities resumed, there was a layer of awareness underneath everything. A quiet understanding that stability can shift without warning. That awareness isn't loud. It doesn't scream for attention. It just sits there, steady and present. The call also took a certain kind of simplicity from my relationships. Before, I assumed there would always be another chance to say what I meant. Another opportunity to apologize. Another day to express appreciation. After that night, I stopped assuming. I started saying things out loud. I started lingering a little longer during goodbyes. I started paying attention to the tone of conversations. Not because I was afraid every moment would be the last, but because I understood that nothing is guaranteed. There's a cost to that understanding. It makes you more aware, more sensitive to change, more conscious of how quickly life can turn. But it also makes you present. Still, I won't pretend it was easy. There was fear that followed, a quiet anxiety that showed up at random times. Driving past intersections made me tense. Late-night calls made my stomach drop. Even when things improved, a part of me remained on alert. That's what the call took. It took the illusion that bad things happened far away, to other people, in other stories. It brought reality closer. It took the version of me that believed tomorrow was promised, the version that moved through life without questioning how fragile it all is. And in its place, it left someone who understood that a single moment, carried through a small glowing screen, can rearrange your priorities, your perspective, and the way you hold the people you love. That call didn't just take something from me. It taught me, not in a loud, dramatic way, not with a clear lesson written across the sky. The teaching came slowly, in the quiet days that followed, in the small shifts I began to notice in myself. The first thing it taught me was attention. Before that night, I was always moving, thinking about the next task, the next deadline, the next plan. I listened to people, but sometimes only halfway. I sat at dinner tables while checking my phone. I said, "I'm fine," without really asking if the other person was. After that call, I started looking up more. When someone spoke, I tried to hear them fully. When I hugged someone goodbye, I held it a second longer. I stopped assuming there would always be more time to be present. It taught me that ordinary moments are not ordinary at all. The quiet evenings, the random conversations, the simple drive safe texts, those are the pieces that build a life. And they can disappear faster than we think. I used to chase big milestones, promotions, achievements, future plans. I thought the turning points in life would be obvious and grand. But that call showed me something different. Life changes in small, quiet ways. A phone lighting up in the dark, a voice on the other end, a sentence you weren't prepared to hear. And suddenly your priorities shift without asking your permission. It taught me to say things while I still can. To apologize when I'm wrong instead of letting pride stretch the silence. To say, "I love you," without waiting for the perfect moment. To express gratitude instead of assuming it's understood. Because that night made one thing clear. There may not be a later. It also taught me resilience, though I didn't recognize it at first. In the middle of the fear and confusion, I didn't feel strong. I felt small, unsteady, overwhelmed. But I kept moving. I drove through the dark. I walked into that hospital. I asked the questions that needed to be asked. I stood in rooms I never imagined standing in. I handled conversations I never rehearsed. Strength doesn't always feel powerful in the moment. Sometimes it just looks like showing up when you'd rather run. Like staying steady when your hands are shaking. That call taught me that I am capable of more than I thought. It taught me empathy in a way nothing else could. Sitting in waiting rooms, watching other families pace the floor, I realized how many people are carrying invisible stories. How many lives are quietly shifting behind closed doors while the rest of the world continues as normal. Now, when someone seems distracted or distant, I don't jump to judgment as quickly. I wonder what call they might have received, what weight they might be carrying silently. It taught me that control is an illusion, but choice is not. I can't control every outcome. I can't prevent every accident or erase every hardship. But I can choose how I respond. I can choose to be present. I can choose to love without holding back. I can choose to appreciate the ordinary. That call forced me to slow down in ways I had resisted before. It interrupted the noise of everyday life and made me look at what actually matters. Not the emails, not the deadlines, not the minor inconveniences that used to steal my energy. What matters are the people whose names light up your screen, the voices you recognize instantly, the relationships that anchor you when everything else feels uncertain. The biggest lesson wasn't about fear. It was about awareness. Awareness that life is fragile. Awareness that time is limited. Awareness that a single moment can redraw the shape of your future. I don't live in constant worry now. That's not the lesson. The lesson isn't to be afraid of every late-night call. It's to live in a way that if the phone lights up again, I know I've said what needed to be said. That I didn't wait too long. That I didn't assume too much. That I didn't treat ordinary days as if they were guaranteed. One call, one light, everything changed. And in the quiet that followed, I learned to see my life differently, to hold it more carefully, and to move through it with a deeper understanding of how quickly a single moment can redefine what truly matters.